What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore. And we do that by highlighting the practitioners that make this the best field possible. Today, we got Hunter Eisenhower from Arizona State. Thank you for coming on, Hunter. There are tons of other things you could be doing. Thanks for coming on and sharing, brother.
No, thank you. You caught me at a good time of the year right before go back to training and right before me and my wife have our second daughter. So it's a perfect little window that fits.
Congratulations on second parenting. I'm telling you, man, you're going from zone to man, brother.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's like I try not to think about it or I'm just gonna face the reality when it hits, but I'm excited for it. And two little girls, so girl dad, I enjoyed it. So we'll see. You just go with the flow, you know?
I'm jumping right into it. And this was a conversation that I had with Kenna Smoke Manisi. She is at Army. She is not with football. She's other sports. Mm-hmm. And at the NSCA coaches conference during her acceptance speech for assistant strength coach of the year in college, she said, she's like, I don't believe, she essentially said that work-life balance is fake news. It's work-life integration. And I couldn't believe that anymore. My children were around practice. They were around game when I was at Towson. I was just over at a local high school yesterday doing some force plate jumps with Hawkin. Same stuff that you got. Shout out to Hawkin. We both love Hawkin.
Yep.
But the guy there, the head strength coach there, his kids were there and they were around. And we both talked about the work-life integration. And so I'm preceding all of that. Are you able to do that at your job? Because I'm sure that would just make your life so much better.
Yeah, so I would say right now, not really, because fortunately my wife is able to stay home with my daughter so they can hang out all day, which is a very fortunate situation. And then I live pretty far from school, so it's like a 30+ minute commute. And then also my daughter is still a year and a couple months. So like she's still pretty young, but whenever my kids do get older, like I want to have them around and like have them a part of things. But I do think that the work-life balance piece is it's just such an interesting topic to talk about, especially once you have kids, because then it gets real. But like I've had the last couple of days off and it's like I just try to, and I don't always do a great job of it, but I just try to, like, whenever my daughter's awake and she wants to play, like I'm playing. And then whenever she goes down for a nap like she is now, then I'm like, okay, I'm going to lock in for the hour to 2 hours I have, because she's going to wake up at any point. And then I try to be, I always heard like time is the most valuable commodity. And before I had kids and like when it was just me and my wife and we could kind of do our own thing all day, it'd be like, well, like I have plenty of time to do stuff. And now I'm like, I have playtime with her. She's going to eat. I'm going to work on stuff for 2 hours, play with her. And then I'm going to work out for 30 minutes in my garage. And then I'm going to hang out with my wife. Like it is very regimented days. So yeah, it gets real.
Now it's gotta be easier when you have the title of assistant head coach. Like that's
the thing. Are you speaking specifically to my title at Arizona State?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a weird quirk about this position. Everybody, like whenever I first got the job and people saw it, it's associate head coach. Everybody's like, dang, you got an associate head coach title. Like my friends are texting me like, dude, you got an associate head coach title? We just call our strength staff weird names at Arizona State. So it's like associate head coach, comma, sports performance. So I don't have an associate head coach title for the basketball team. If I did, I'd probably make a lot more money. I have associate head coach
in strength and conditioning,
sports performance. Yeah. So it's like, it's not with basketball. So that's just like a clarification I've had to make a couple times. So it's like Leanne Blinn is the head coach. Or no, maybe she has a director title. I don't know. Our titles are all over the place. Titles is a whole nother conversation. They're just ridiculous. But she is my technically boss. I'm the associate head coach. And then there's assistant performance coaches like underneath us. So it's kind of just like all over the place with titles. But yeah.
That makes sense, because at Towson, before we changed everything, it was very similar where it's like, hey, there's a head strength coach of the team strength and conditioning, and you're an assistant strength coach, but you're technically the head strength coach for your team. Exactly. That's how it used to be.
Yeah, that's how it is now. And technically I'm still under the like Olympic staff umbrella. Gotcha. And then there's supposedly a dotted line to the basketball staff, like Coach Hurley. So in all actuality, like that's the structure of my position. However, if you work in like football or basketball, like the head coach is your boss. So
Correct.
that's just kind of how it's structured, like logistically. But in all reality, like I work underneath the basketball staff and spend 95% of my time with them.
So it's interesting you say that because I did a deep dive on the NFL strength and conditioning coaches staff structure based off of special interest group that I'm doing with the NSCA. And there are 10 out of 32 NFL teams that their strength coach, very similar to what you said, hey, fall under like the front office, not to the head coach, but like you said, there's the dotted line. That's how it was for me at Towson. But like you just said, you and I both know what that really means.
Yeah.
And these NFL strength coaches have been telling me they actually don't like it that way because they miss out on like playoff bonuses and they're not as safe. So my question to you with all of that preface is, what do you think is best for strength and conditioning coaches? Do you think it's best that we're in this high performance design where we're under medical? Are we supposed to be coaches? What is your thought on it all?
It's a really good question. And I think so. The way I know of the structure within college basketball is typically if you're hired underneath the basketball staff directly, it's like high risk, high reward. Those guys make a lot more money, but unless they get retained by the new head coach, they're going to get fired. My position, as I was told when I came in, was like, hey, you're underneath the Olympic staff. So if the basketball staff ends up moving on or getting fired, there would still be a position for you on the Olympic staff.
Keeping your certification is essential to staying hired as a strength and conditioning coach. Both of our long-form courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, offer CEUs to the NSCA, the NCSF, as well as the ASCA professional development points. Click the link down below to learn more about our education courses, which are both over 20 hours long and allow you to learn from some of the best practitioners in the field of strength and conditioning.
I don't know. Like, I think that it almost potentially could be left up to the person employed, which I know would never be the case, but it's like, do you want to go high risk, high reward and make 2 times the money being underneath the basketball staff? And if they're out, you're out. Or do you want to be on the Olympic staff and work with men's basketball and make a little bit less money, but we'll keep you around if the basketball staff gets fired? I don't know the best structure. I think that we're transitioning to the point where everybody's just going to be understaffs. Like volleyball is going to hire their own strength coach. Obviously football, basketball, baseball is going to have their own strength coach, and you're just going to be tied to the staff, which I like that. And I've always wanted to be like a part of the team. So if that allows me to like be a part of the team more and be like on the coaching staff as opposed to just the strength coach that works with men's basketball, then I would take that. But even though my structure right now is like Olympic staff that works with men's basketball, I'm as involved with the basketball team and staff that I would be even if I was like hired directly under the staff, if that makes sense.
No, that does. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And as somebody that has lived in that world and been on both sides of it, like, okay, I was high risk, high reward at Iowa. Like we knew, bro, if you don't win, you ain't get like, there's a chance we gonna get fired.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when we did win, we got bowl bonuses, and Coach Ferentz, like he made sure that even us, we called ourselves the slappy strength coaches because it was Doyle and Ray, the 2 head guys, and then like did Marco, myself, Cody, Joel, Weissman. But Coach Ferentz made sure that even us slappies would get that same bowl bonus because he knew how much that we were involved.
Yeah.
Flip side, you go to Towson, I was told the same exact thing. Hey, you're not tied to the department. You're even going to work with other teams. But then all that happens is the football coach can't directly fire you. They just play telephone. They're like, hey, athletic director, please remove this person.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so from, again, hey, it's a business. I get it. That's why I would just prefer, and I'm not saying you're saying it, I'm saying that me personally and anybody listening, I think for us strength and conditioning coaches, I think the best thing for us would be to work for the staff because it is what it is. And just go into it knowing what it is. High risk it, high reward. You know, when you invest in the stock market, high risk, high reward. You want a bond, you get a bond, right? Like just go into the thing knowing what's going to happen.
Yep. No, I agree with you. And I think that like, it also depends on the reward, you know, like some of the basketball strength coaches around the country are making like a lot of money. And I think that like, if we're talking that, I'm not going to say life-changing amount of money because maybe a little dramatic, but potentially like life altering.
Pretty dang close to life changing. Like
life altering money.
Life altering. I like that.
Even if you have a chance to make that for 2-3 years, you know, like that, and you're like smart with it, like that is life-changing. You set yourself up really well, even if you do end up getting fired, versus working on an Olympic staff for like maybe 8-9 years to make the same amount, you know, like maybe you might not even make it that long. Like you're probably going to move on to a new position anyway. So like, yeah, you might as well go high risk, high reward, try to win as many games as you can and stay afloat.
And like you said, it naturally just makes you, like I said, for us at Iowa, it was like, bro, all right, we got to tighten up. Like it made us, it was just like in coaching, right? Like you made a post the other day about the isokinetic movements. And it's like, all right, that isokinetic device forces you to move at a certain speed because the device, just like anything in coaching, you try to create good drills where the athlete will do the thing you want them to do without you having to say it.
Yeah.
At Iowa, we didn't have to be told. Like we knew you don't win enough games. And so like it lights that fire underneath you and it drives you. And then at the same time, like if you move on, it gives a new batch of strength coaches somewhere to go. Cause right. Like otherwise there's just all this pressure and nobody can get a job because nobody's leaving. And that also happened at Iowa.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. Tying in the isokinetic thing was nice there, but I agree with you that like, it is a good point that I think that you see this more in like the medical side, potentially with like athletic training, is athletic trainers are at schools forever. And it's like, to your point, how is an athletic if your dream is to be the athletic trainer at Arizona State, well, our athletic trainer has been here for 10 plus years, you know, like that job opens up one more time in your lifetime. And then it's like never going to open up again. So yeah, that's a good point of like, and I think it's just the nature of our profession is like, I've moved a ton throughout my career and I've never been fired, knock on wood. But it's like I've still moved often. Yeah. So it's either like in most situations within this field, you're either getting fired or you're moving on to another position trying to climb the ladder. So it's like you're going to move regardless until you get to the point where you're comfortable and happy and like want to lay roots. And that's kind of where I am now. But up until this point, it was like, hey, I want to work at this job, do a really, really good job. And like whenever the next opportunity presents itself, I'm going to jump at it.
How did you wind up getting to Arizona State?
So I was at UC Davis for a year and a half, almost 2 years under Jeff Burke. Worked with like football, basketball, and a bunch of other sports. And I was at kind of like a crossroads there for a while of, do I want to pursue working in football? Because I really enjoyed it because I played college basketball and like working in football and strength and conditioning, as you know, is just like, it's electric. Like being in the weight room during training a football team is awesome. And I was working with basketball at UC Davis at the time, and I just found myself being more like gravitated toward just like with what I knew of basketball and just being more comfortable with the guys and like comfortable with the sport itself. And I was like, okay, I want to make a move to like a basketball only or close to a basketball only position because my wife was pregnant with our first daughter at the time, and my hours were like 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I was like, this is probably not going to be doable with a kid. I mean, it is, but I don't want it to be. So I was just looking for like basketball only opportunities, and I applied for college jobs. None of them really worked out. Interviewed for a couple, didn't get them. And then the Kings position opened up. I applied for it. I had a couple mutual connections, went through the whole interview process, and ended up getting hired by the Sacramento Kings. And I was the head of the G League team and assistant for the NBA team. And I was there for a year. And going into that position, it was like I could see myself being here for 2-3, but I know the end game is like a Power 5 Division I basketball program. And if one of those jobs presents itself, like I'm going to leave after a year if I need to, because travel in professional sports, especially the NBA, is nuts. And then at the end of the year or toward the end of the year, I got a text from Justin Landry, who's the basketball strength coach at Georgia Tech, who was at San Diego State the year they went to the national championship game like 2 years ago. And he texted me, hey, I'm going to Georgia Tech. Would you be interested in San Diego State? I said, yeah, absolutely. I went through it was like a 6 to 7 week interview process, couple Zooms. I flew down on campus, spent the day with staff, administration, strength coaches. And me and my wife were just like hesitant about moving to San Diego because it's so expensive to live there. Mm-hmm. And we just really wanted the next place we lived to like be able to buy a house and lay roots. So went down, interviewed. I felt so good about it. Usually I feel horrible about interviews. And I was like, I flew home and I was like, I think I'm going to get this job. Get a call from the head coach. Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr has been my online software platform choice since 2019. Been using it at Towson, using it at Goldfinch, and use it with my online remote clients. You can learn more about them in the link down below. TeamBuildr is also part owner in the Plyomat, which will allow you to get
quick, valid, and reliable jump data, jump height, ground contact time, and reactive strength index in just seconds. They are part owner of Plyomat, so you can check them out in the link down below as well.
2 days later, hey, Hunter. And I knew immediately I didn't get the job. And I was like, oh, damn. So he's like, hey, didn't get the job. And then he, like, right before he hung up, he said, would you be interested in Arizona State? And little did he know, I've texted my phone from like 5 months previous, talking to a friend of mine saying Arizona State was my like dream job. It was November. I remember it was like November. I was in some crazy little small G League city texting Charles Young at Fresno State. And we were just talking about jobs. And I said, yeah, Arizona State's my dream job. So he said, would you be interested in Arizona State? And I was like, yeah, but I thought it was kind of just like I feel bad for not hiring you. I know of a job that's coming available. Turns out San Diego State hired Daniel Marshall, who was at Arizona State. So the Arizona State staff was like, listen, you just went through a whole process trying to find a new strength coach. Can we just take your top 3 candidates and interview them? I was one of those top 3 because I was the runner up to Daniel. They interviewed the 3 of us on like that happened on a Thursday, had my first interview Friday, second Saturday, offered the job on Sunday. And then my wife was actually out of town at the time while this whole Arizona State process was going on. And I called her after each interview. And then I called her like, hey, I got the job. And I was like, are we going to take it? She's like, yeah. So yeah, that's very long-winded, but just a quick or a long-winded version of how I got here. Cause it was total, God had his hands all over that whole process, because to end up in like the one job in the country that's my dream job, as we were just talking about how hard it is to get jobs, it's like that doesn't happen, like what are the chances that I'm 29 years old and I end up at Arizona State working with men's basketball, like my dream job? It, like, I don't know, I walk into the practice gyms or like put on my shirt in the morning and I just like get goosebumps still a year and a half into this job of like, holy shit, like I'm really working the job I said was my dream job. So it's surreal.
I just got goosebumps, man. I hope our listeners did too, because that's a fantastic story. And was your wife like close to bursting pregnancy wise when you got the job?
No. We already had our daughter. So our daughter was born right before the NBA season started. So I went like the whole first year my only year with the Kings. My daughter was a newborn to a year old. And then we moved to Arizona. And the other crazy part of this whole thing was, for whatever reason, me and my wife for the last 6 years have talked about how much we wanted to live in Arizona, not even attached to the Arizona State dream job thing. It was just like, wow, because we love warm weather and we heard that the housing market was really good here. So we were like, I feel like we want to live in Arizona. And we said that since we were literally like seniors in college. And then now we have a house in Phoenix, and I don't know. It's just,
are you guys Mountain Time Zone or we
switch back and forth. It's weird. I know. Yeah. I didn't know that until my schedule got screwed up. We're Pacific right now. And then we switched to Mountain Standard at some point in the year.
That's their way of saying that they don't do daylight savings time, but they really do.
Yeah. It's weird. It screwed me up big time.
Mountain Time Zone seems like, the reason I asked that is I've been saying this to my wife. I think Mountain Time Zone would be my favorite, because I go to bed super early. And so it's like, all right, Monday Night Football is going to start at 6 p.m. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you. The Pacific is a little,
it's too
early.
Late. Yeah. Too late, too early. Yeah, exactly. Too early. Yes.
And East is just like, I've never lived on the East Coast before, but like, you're not watching anything. It's like 10 p.m. tips for like the late NBA game. I'm like, who watches that on the East Coast?
I couldn't agree with you more. That is a fantastic story for everybody to hear. Keep on having the faith, keep on doing the thing. Good for you for that interview process too, because that can be really difficult, especially when you feel good about things and you're like, yeah, I really nailed it.
Yeah, it was a draining process. I remember waking up the morning of the on-campus interview at San Diego State. I had to wake up at like 4 a.m. And I just remember sitting there like almost having a panic attack because of just like the overwhelming nature of the interview process, and me and my wife's hesitancy of like moving to San Diego. And we had prayed about it a ton. And I was just like, man, I was so unsure. And then I didn't get the job. And it was actually kind of like a huge blessing, because then if I would have got the San Diego State job, we probably would have accepted it. And I would have never known that Daniel Marshall was the runner up. And if I would have turned it down, that I would have ended up in my dream job, So it's just like crazy that I was I was a finalist, didn't get it. Daniel Marshall gets it. I'm able to go to Arizona State. It's just, yeah, yeah.
God's time is always better than ours, brother. But we like at first you never want to hear it.
It's crazy because none of that stuff you can predict. And somehow, and I'm not saying that it works out like that every time.
Nope, it doesn't.
That's
you just got to enjoy it when it does.
Yeah, man. And I think about that often. I try to tell that story as often as possible because it is, yeah, it's incredible.
So this is a rumor that I heard about the NBA job as an assistant. Is during the off season, do you really have to fly and train players individually, like if they go back home?
Yes and no. So like within an NBA staff, typically from at least what I've been exposed to and the friends I have that still work in the NBA is like you typically split the roster up to certain guys, to certain people. So like with us, we had myself and another assistant, a head strength coach and a director of performance. The director of performance handles like a lot of the sports science and all the most of the food logistics. So then he doesn't have the higher profile guys. He has like one higher profile guy and like 3 or 4 kind of like rotational players. The head strength coach has like most of the high profile guys. The assistant has a couple guys, and then I work with like the young guys, the 2-way guys. And whenever your guy either wanted you to come out or the organization felt like they wanted you to go out and see him for a little bit to see how he's doing, then yeah, you would go out. So like the head strength coach, Zach Howe, he worked with De'Aaron Fox very closely, both on the table, like manual therapy and strength and conditioning, because he has a physical therapy background. And he would often fly to San Diego during the off season and visit him and train him for like a week and then fly back. And it was typically when he started like a new phase in the weight room, he'd go down there for a week, train him for the first week so he kind of like know how things rolled, and then the next 3 weeks were pretty similar. And then he also, so Fox got married the off season I got there, and they did a honeymoon in like Italy and these different places, and Zach flew to Italy to like train him and work with him over there. So it's if you're able to like bring your family along and stuff, it's just like occasional vacations to different areas that these guys are living in. If you're not, then that extra travel during the off season would kind of suck. But yeah, yes and no. Like I never had to. The director didn't, the assistant didn't, but Zach did quite a bit because he was working with Fox, and Fox was one of those guys, and a lot of the other guys stayed local.
Kudos to you for how you explained it, because you made it sound way better than the rumor that I heard about it. Like that actually sounds kind of nice.
I mean, that was my experience to it, and
True.
I know that like
True.
I know that some of like the Heat staff that I know, they were over in Paris the whole time that Bam was playing in the Olympics. And I'm sure that like all those guys had their guy over there with him training. So like, again, to me, if like you're able to bring your family with those things, like that's great. Like you train one guy for a couple hours a day and you're at practice. And
taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Hawkin Dynamics. I've had Hawkin Dynamics for multiple years, dating back to my time at Towson, and still utilize them here at Goldfinch when I'm training athletes in Iowa. Hawkin Dynamics makes it simple to be able to get input to find out what's going on underneath the hood with your athletes. Whether it's lower body assessment, upper body assessments, you want reliable data to find out how the athlete is putting force into the ground so you can be able to accurately return an athlete from an injury, and you can also find out how the athlete is producing force to check how your training is working. Check out Hawkin Dynamics in the link down below.
Then you just get to go hang out with your family in these cool spots. But if it's like, hey, you're just flying over and this is like work and you're just like following this guy around and you don't get to bring your family and it's just like you're going to be in Paris for 6 weeks during the Olympics, that would suck. I mean, it would be odd. I don't want to say it would suck. That's probably dramatic. It would be an incredible experience, but you travel so much during the season to then have to travel again during the off season and be away from your family would be tough.
Yeah, which is exactly why the players brought their families.
Exactly. Yeah.
You talked about he had his hands on. It seems that there are tons of LMTs, whatever the actual acronym and certification and licensure that strength coaches can get to put their hands on athletes in basketball in particular. Do you think A, it's going to shift to the fact that they all have to in basketball? B, should they? C, could it eventually go to all strength coaches everywhere, because there was a strength coach in the NFL that has it, and he thinks that could be a new frontier for strength coaches?
Yeah, I think what's interesting in like team sport, especially in basketball, is, for example, in the NBA, what I said about the head strength coach is potentially a bad example, and it goes against what I'm about to say, but it seems fairly siloed. Like you have your people that work in nutrition, you have your performance staff, you have your medical staff, and there are some people that double dip in certain areas, but fairly like this is your expertise state. College is the same way. Like I'm not allowed to put hands on guys. We have an athletic trainer, we have a physical therapist that works with the team. I handle performance and some nutrition, but we also have a nutritionist that helps. What's interesting is getting to know people that work outside of the team setting is like off-season training, especially in basketball. I feel like guys are just wanting like a one-stop shop. It's like, can I get a guy to train me on the court, also do some performance stuff, also potentially do some manual therapy, and at least get my body feeling a little bit better and help me with nutrition? And I have a friend here in Phoenix who kind of, him and one other person handle everything. He does on court, he does performance. His friend does the manual therapy and that stuff. And that is becoming more and more attractive to me because I find myself with a basketball background, like gravitating toward wanting to at least like bridge the gap between performance and basketball, because there is a regardless of how specific you get in the weight room, like there's always going to be a general nature to what we do. So like you can't get like specific. And I feel myself being drawn to like being more on the skill development side because for a long time, that's what I thought I wanted to do. So I think that in the team setting, it still feels siloed, but in the NBA is a unique situation to where if you have the skill set to do both, I think in most situations they kind of allow you to. Whereas in college, I feel like it's potentially more just like you're the strength coach, you're the athletic trainer, you're the physical therapist.
Did you know, or do you still know Mike Roncardi, who was with the Golden State Warriors?
I don't.
He was there. He was a strength. He was technically a physical therapist. Was employed as a strength coach. He was super. He used to compete in powerlifting. He's from the East Coast, like me, and we used to do. I used to go up to visit his college because one of my close friends from high school was there. But he was with the Warriors, and again, similar situation where PT, but he had the strength conditioning background, doing the two things. And Mike Chapman also, we worked together at Towson. He's now at LSU, but it was at Stanford. And like, again, just that ability to do those type of things and seeing the progression for strength coaches.
And I know that Matt Aldred, who you just had on, has talked about the fat tools he uses. I think like he's certified in some type of, it's called FAT, and it's like fascial abrasion technique, I believe. That could be totally wrong, but sounds right. And he talks about how he's certified in that and has used that before with his guys. So that's more manual therapy and something that he is certified in. And I do think, like, I do find myself being interested in getting some type of, whether it's massage therapy or some of that like fat certification, in order to be able to do some of those things, because it just adds another tool to your toolbox of like, before a game, before a practice, a guy needs whatever. And it's like, okay, my ISOs aren't really going to work for you right now. It's like, what can I do to make you feel better with this manual therapy technique?
For what it's worth, the guy who was he was the director of strength and conditioning at Towson. He was in a tough situation because he had to oversee the department. But like we just said earlier, I mean, I was under him, but was really tied to the head football coach. Same thing with basketball. But Aaron Dregge was getting his LMT for similar reason, like because if he wanted to be able to do some, he came from a Cal Dietz background, so RPR obviously. So it's like, hey, let's just do this to be able to have the certification and the protection with the licensure of hands-on guys before games and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. I think,
and again, he was doing it full time while working too. So anybody listening that's interested,
yeah, I would definitely be interested in doing that. That doesn't fit on my plate right now.
Yeah, right now, especially with a kid coming. You're only been there. You're like, yeah, you got a lot going on.
But eventually.
Speaking of things that, systems and things you got going, what is the FORCE system for anybody that is unfamiliar? You clearly talk about it a ton. What is it? How can people better understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's really just like my brainchild over the last 2-3 years. And it's just kind of like incrementally grown over time. And it really just started back of my time with the Kings. It all started with the book Force by Dan Cleather, who it's an incredible book, and he's incredibly smart. And I say this every time I talk about it because he has 2 books. He has the first Force book, the second one's more directed towards sprinting. The first one is more generally just focused on like the idea of force and physics. And there's concepts in that book that are way over my head. Like he's too smart for me to understand some things. But the one that I kept coming back to is just force equals mass times acceleration. And it was like we as strength coaches focus so much on the mass portion of force, and we say athletes are strong and it's how much force they can produce. But then I questioned, like, are the exercises that we're doing traditionally, your trap bar deadlifts, your back squats, your front squats, your rear foot elevated split squats, loaded maximally, really producing that much force? So I just got on force plates, started experimenting with stuff, started like manipulating that equation a little bit, adding more acceleration, adding less mass. What I found is that there's just different ways that you can manipulate that equation to expose athletes to more force, like ground reaction force, which in basketball is really the name of the game. You can argue in football and other like hand-to-hand combat sports, like you need to move other mass. And you do need to do that in basketball, but potentially not as vital as something like football. So that was where it started. Started messing around with drop catches, what I call drop catches, overcoming ISOs, depth drops.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, Vitruve VBT. With Vitruve, you can accurately measure what speeds your athletes are moving the bar. No longer do you have to program simply based on sets and reps. You can program for your more mature athletes based on the velocities that they are hitting. You can accurately measure at a great price with Vitruve, and you can have this integrate with your TeamBuildr, making it simple so you no longer have to write down the recorded reps from other devices. Everything in one place with Vitruve VBT. Check them out in the link down below.
And I started thinking about that concept. And then I there's other parts of what I program that I think are vitally important. Like linear speed development is probably the most, or speed development in general is probably the most important piece of my programming, regardless of sport I work with. And I also think that, like, especially with basketball players, how much of a beating their tendons take, that having some sort of protocol methodology within your program to treat the tissue within the body. And then I also am just like a big fan and proponent of what I call like human training, like crawling and crouching and climbing and just doing very, very general things. So all these thoughts are going on in my head. I'm like, how can I systematically think and program this stuff? And really the whole force system started as a way for me to just like think about my own programming and make it systematic in my head. And then I just started posting about it and started catching some like good traction. So I just started posting about more of my thoughts. But really, to put all that into a tie nice little bow on top, the force system is just like 4 main categories that I program within. It's high force, which is going to be your drop catches, your overcoming ISOs, your depth drops, and a focus on like building deceleration qualities. Fast force is going to be linear speed and oscillatory movement, rotational, reciprocal, and every rep different movement. Slow force is going to be like your yielding isometrics, your slow tempo movements, some hypertrophy work, and then local tissue prep is what I call it. And then human force is going to be your crawling, your crouching, your having basketball players play football or baseball or soccer or spike ball. And then all that like more general training. So it's really those 4 themes that then I implement throughout the year based on the time I'm at during the year, and also the individual that's in front of me. You can like tailor those different sections to better fit what needs to be fit. And again, it's grown and continues to grow. The more I think about it, the more I like add and take away and refine. But it is just the system of how I think about programming now. And yeah, that's I could probably talk about it for the next 6 hours. So I'll leave it at that, and we can go anywhere that you want to take it if you have any other follow-ups.
So if anybody was listening to what you just said, like they want to be able to do a high mass at a slower speed would be your slow force stuff. A low mass at a high acceleration is your fast force. And then would something be like, all right, an in between mass, in between acceleration,
So
an attempted high acceleration at a high mass?
So the high force category is really the only theme that you're messing with that force equals mass times acceleration equation.
Got it.
So that high force training, let's just call it a high force day. Like I'm trying to program a high force day. Early on, you're going to do traditional movements. Mass is going to be high, acceleration is going to be pretty low. Like I'm not throwing out heavy trap bar deadlifts and heavy whatever squats. I start there and I do that for a while. And then during that high force day, I begin to transition over time to something like a drop catch, to where now I reduce mass, increase acceleration, and hit higher forces. And then you go from like drop catches to depth drops, where you can have somebody drop off like a 56-inch box and hit like 10 times body weight force. Then you transition to depth drops. So really that high force day is where you're like manipulating that equation. Fast force is more dedicated to like think less about force equals mass times acceleration. And there's just certain things within that fast force day that you're trying to do. Slow force is going to be primarily like yielding isometrics or really slow tempo movement, more of like a tendon based, tissue based program. So the force equals mass times acceleration equation and how you manipulate that really just is involved in the high force day.
Okay, that makes sense. And my dad brain, as you were saying that to me, was like, you should make some t-shirts that says "May the Force be with you." Like,
Hey,
you know what I mean? Like,
I do love Star Wars, so
there it is. You're welcome.
I do. Yeah,
Like, may the force be with you, and then like find a like put your like do you know what I mean? Like make your logo of something like with your head, and you like, I don't know, that could be pretty good.
It's not a bad idea.
Like,
do I have to give you some royalty if I end up
no,
doing that?
no, you don't, because that like that makes strength and conditioning not boring anymore. That's fantastic.
Stuff. You might see a post in the next couple days.
You know what?
With that, and I'll tag you.
Please do.
I'll tag you.
That's I mean, so then the high force day. Again, the reason I'm trying to wrap it around my brain, it's not you surfing the force velocity curve essentially too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's working the extremes. Like you're working like high force is working anywhere from like maximal strength to some of that higher force activity, like a depth drop. And then the fast force day is like max velocity, linear speed, all the way to like oscillatory movement with like minimal weight. But like if you actually look at like contraction speeds and relaxation of antagonist and antagonist muscles, like fast. So
will you go full triphasic AFSM or whatever that acronym is?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know like much about it. I think that it would definitely fall into a fast force theme. And like some of that oscillatory movement is pretty much that anyways. I think it's just like a fancier name for it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, even like, anybody listening that's done, like I've gone through a phase of it. You go start doing the oscillatory in the disadvantageous positions. Like that stuff's not easy to do.
It's tough. If you hit like I love one of my favorite is like so there's 3 different like variations of oscillatory movements all program. One is rhythm, and that's usually where I start in my progression, and it's like I love doing it. Like I love roof elevated split squat, so I'll do a lot of my oscillatory movements in that position. And a rhythm oscillatory, or what I call a rhythm oscillatory, is going to be like a full range of motion movement, but it's like a bouncing rhythmic movement as opposed to like eccentric, concentric pause. It's like bouncing rhythmic, and program higher volumes, like 14, 16 reps of just like feeling bounce. They're holding like a very light kettlebell. Then the next one is rapid, to where you get to that disadvantageous position. And now it's like I'm pushing and pulling within like a 4 to 5 inch increment. And that, like, if you're doing 14 reps of that and your intent is actually like push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, like that is tough. Like your gas, your heart rate's up. And then the last one would be a relax oscillatory, which I took from Joel Smith's book, Speed Strength. And it's to where you would get to almost to the bottom of like a roof elevated split squat. You tense every muscle up in your entire body, like you were trying to contract everything as hard as you can. And at the same second, you're trying to relax everything in your entire body. And he says you'll have, if you get to the point where you're actually good at like relaxing musculature, you'll get to the point where like you'll have a
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, SleepMe. SleepMe are the makers of the Chili Pad, which has been my bed cooling device since 2020. Chili Pad will allow you to sleep and not wake up hot anymore. This was something that I had to worry about. I used to have the air conditioning down way too low. Now, I don't have to have the air conditioning as low because my Chili Pad, my Dock Pro, keeps my bed cold at night. Check out SleepMe, check out the Chili Pad, check out the Dock Pro in the link down below.
Subtle like free fall to the bottom, and he says there should be like a natural innate like recoil that comes out from the bottom, and that's like your connective tissue stretching and recoiling, so you get more of like the ability to access and actually use and get your body used to using connective tissue as opposed to musculature. So it's like the progression I like to use. But all that to say, yeah, oscillatory movements, they look kind of goofy, but if you actually do them with the right intent, they're taxing.
100%. Same question that one of our listeners had for Matt when I had him on. Do you do any fly 10 stuff, especially with it being your fast force days, where your athletes are going to be running longer than you would have on the court to get them to reach those higher velocities because there's longer distance?
100%. Yeah. We'll hit. I haven't won a 30-yard build, 10-yard fly, but we're 25-yard build, 10-yard fly. So
They're
that's
cooking.
what. So 30 yards would be 90 feet. A basketball court's 94 feet. So if we're hitting a 25 and a 10, that's 35 yards. So longer than a basketball court that they are building and flying. So yeah, we had a couple guys hit like 21 miles an hour last year at the end of the off season. Nobody's hit that fast, but we still have another 3 weeks before practice starts. And we were hitting some 20 plus 10s at the end of our summer block. So by the time that practice rolls around, maybe when this episode releases, we'll have some guys hit some 25 plus 10s and hopefully hit, I don't know, 0.99s.
Yeah, because that was what the listener had asked. They're like, hey, if you have the ability to, could you, would you? They were like, hey, based off of, the speed reserve, if you're increasing your max
Yeah.
velocity, blah blah blah.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm fortunate to have our weight room has a track. It's like a 3-lane track right outside of our weight room. And we have
Nice.
big garage doors along the whole side. And it's 60 yards. So like we have plenty of space to hit some long flies. And we'll do some like different buildups and like a scissor progression into some flies. But yeah, we will on those fast force days, we're out on the track sprinting and doing different variations of plyometrics and different things for probably 40 minutes. And we probably are in the weight room for 15, 20. But yeah, we sprint a ton. And I have like interns tell me like, this is the most speed work I've ever seen done in my life, regardless of sport. And I think it's really important, and I track a lot of things. And I really focus on that. And I think that the last thing I'll say is specifically about speed work is, and I see this with some of the individuals that are working with me right now, is like, they're kind of writing programs as we go for whatever phase we in. And then we talk about it just as a way to opportunity for them to work on their programming for whenever they get a head job. And you'll see them like their notebook as you're talking. And it's like, this is my weight room stuff. And it's like, well, this is the first page of notes. This is my second page of notes. Like, this is what I want to do in the weight room. And then they flip to like their speed work page and it's like 3 lines at the top. And I'm like, I think, and I think that plenty of strength coaches would probably disagree with this, but like for me, you should write like a novel for your speed work and like cliff notes for your weight room, because the weight room can be so simple. And I'm not necessarily saying that the novel is presented to the athletes, but it's like a novel worth of thoughts that can be simplified down to then present to the athletes. But I spend 75% of my time thinking about like my speed development, my deceleration, which has been a huge rabbit hole for me recently. And then it's like, okay, we'll get to the weight room, and kind of using the force system, have a systematic way to program. And it doesn't take me very long for the weight room.
That makes a ton of sense. You doing any like kilogram stuff to be able to footage it? Because like, all right, want to make sure that they're having the proper, like how in the weeds are you getting in terms of, foot position and all of that and coaching it with them?
Yeah, I have done kinograms and film starts since back at my time at Davis. Yeah, and I'll look at that stuff recently. This off season, with deceleration being like a big rabbit hole of mine over the last couple of months, and something that I really wanted to like focus on within my sport, because people talk about like basketball being like an acceleration based sport. But if you look at like the research, or even just like look at your own Connects on data, like basketball players hit 2 to 3 to 4 times more decels than they hit acceleration. So it's like basketball is not really an acceleration sport in my opinion. It's a deceleration sport, and a lot of people don't even like put that. I think that you build the qualities for deceleration a lot of time in the weight room, but I think that like putting them into practice is done within more of like a speed work type setting. So yeah, what was your original question? I got sidetracked.
No, you answered the question.
Yeah, so like I think that is, yeah, just always going to continue to be a huge part of my program.
Based off of how much you've moved, what would be something you say to, younger strength coaches, or maybe you've said it to them before, but coaches that maybe don't want to move or don't want to take opportunities, while they're young? What are your thought about that?
Remember the last thing I was going to say for your last question, to the kilogram question. This off season was the first time that I've filmed. So we ran like 180 cuts. It'd be like a 10:05 180 cut where you're sprinting 10. There's a laser set up at 5. You touch, you come back through the lasers. I've actually filmed those decels to be able to, because Jonas Dudu talks a lot about, and like that Speedworks group talks a lot about like the kinematics of deceleration, and like seeing like how long can your athlete accelerate before they have to like hit the brakes, and like being actually able to see foot position in actual deceleration. Am I an expert in that? By no means at all. But it has been something interesting for me to like film and see the kinematics, as opposed to just like, oh, he ran a 199, now he ran a 197. So the kinematics of movement, linear speed wise, has always been present. Watching starts, watching guys get up to top speed, but like the deceleration portion is interesting. But to answer your next question, move and take whatever opportunity you can, especially if you're single, because like my wife is a trooper and has been willing to move 5 times since we've been married in 5 years. And it was like, she got to the point, and I also arrived to the same point, where when I was with the Kings and I was like, hey, I want to like start looking for a college job. She's like, what? Like, again? Like, and I was like, I just had the tendency to be like, I want to continue to try to like progress my career. But she was like, listen, wherever we move next, we need to like buy a house and settle down. And I got to the same point. So like, once you start, and you know this, once you start bringing another person involved, and then you start having kids, like your ability and desire to move all around the country pretty much diminishes. And I'm sure there's people that have kids that still move around the country for sure. Like I'm not saying you can't, but if you're a single person and you have an opportunity, just take it. If it's a good opportunity, like take it, go see what happens. Like worst case scenario, doesn't work out, you look for another one. But like when you're a single guy or girl and you want to make moves in this profession, do it, because eventually life and relationships and kids are going to become prevalent, and you're not going to be as able to do those things.
Yeah, go and take the job. See if you actually want to do it. Like, because you know it as well as I do. When you're the assistant, you make the recommendation, but if the head guy doesn't do it, the head guy doesn't do it. And then the minute you become in charge, you're not playing with house money anymore. And it's not just, I recommend this. It's, oh, we're doing it because I'm supposed to be the one in charge. And coaches need to experience that.
Yeah, 100%. I think that like, you don't know what an opportunity is going to lead to, and you don't know 100% what an opportunity is going to look like when you get there. And like, you could be not as high on an opportunity and then get there, and it could blossom into something incredible that leads to another position. So it's like, you really just never know. And if you have, I'm not saying you just bounce around to bounce around, but like if you have opportunities presents itself, and it's like, let's say you've only lived on the West Coast and it's in Florida, it's like, well, I don't want to move all the way to Florida, just do it. You know, like, you're young, you have the ability to move. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that go into each situation, but yeah, I would definitely say just do it while you're young.
Amen to that. Well, you talked about it earlier. You have a tight schedule with a little one, so we're going to respect your time. Thank you for stopping by and talking with us about the Forest system, everything that you've been doing. Keep up the great work, brother, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Taking a quick break from the show to talk to you about one of our sponsors, PowerLift. PowerLift is located here in Iowa in the United States of America. I've utilized them back in 2011 when I had them at Harvard. I also had them at the University of Maryland, and then finally when I was at the University of Iowa. Their equipment is strong, it is durable, it is dependable. It's also customizable based upon whatever your needs are at your school. Check out PowerLift at the link down below.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.